Hello and welcome back to What About the Children? So joining me today is a remarkable and very charming young man named Ottis. Hello, Ottis.
Hello.
Hello. Now, I just said to you before, didn't I? Can I interview a 14-year-old? I don't know. So we've sort of said we'll start and we'll see how we go. Thankfully, it's not live because then we would have nothing suitable for airing, so don't worry. Okay, so Ottis, how old are you? You're 14 now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm 14.
So Ottis, tell me how old you were when your dad died.
I was 7.
You were 7. Gosh, that's the same age as my son Monty. And actually, you know Monty, don't you? Because your
Yeah, I
mum's a
do.
friend of mine. Yeah. So sometimes when we get together, they sort of disappear and play on the Xbox or do whatever it is. So
Yeah.
at 7, that's a pretty tricky age because you are kind of not really able to process emotions of that magnitude.
Yeah.
So I said to Monty the other day, I said, do you remember me telling you that Dad had died? And he looked at me like I was an idiot and said, well, you're not going to forget that, are you, Mum? And I thought, oh, gosh, well, I've forgotten some quite significant things. But do you remember much about the time? Because he died from cancer, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you remember him being poorly?
Yeah, I remember one time I visited him in the hospital and I ran out of his room and got some stuff to draw on. And I was in his
Yeah,
room drawing.
that's
That's one
cute.
of the
That's
key
cute.
things
Just,
I remember.
yeah, I was going to ask you if you had sort of like almost positive's probably not the right word, but yeah, the sort of special moments because were you aware that he was going to die or at that
No,
age? No.
no, I didn't even think about it.
No, you just sort of blocked that whole concept off.
It didn't even appear in my brain.
Okay, okay. And so when your dad did die, do you remember being told?
I'm pretty sure it was in the middle of my class. I'm not sure which year, but I was,
You'd
where
be
I was
primary
in,
at school, wouldn't you?
yeah, it was in primary. I got taken out of class and I was told by one of the teachers, and I was just out there for 10 minutes crying.
Oh, so a teacher told you.
Yeah,
And then what, did Mum come get you?
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, yeah. Now I know your mum, and I know that she's an absolute super mum, isn't she? And she's raising 2 boys on her own, which is no mean feat, is it? But what? Hang on. I suppose what I wanted to find out really from you, my darling, is because I don't want to push you too hard on the sort of really emotional stuff.
Yeah.
But I suppose I wanted to ask you what, at that time, what gave you comfort? What made you feel safe? Because you must have felt very, very afraid and unsafe. Because I say quite often on the podcast that in children's books and Disney films, what's the worst thing that happens? It's always a dead parent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it happens to you and you must have felt very frightened. And I'm just wondering what if anything gave you comfort other than Mum?
Honestly, not much.
No.
Because, like, it was either I'd hide and cry or hug something.
And by something, do you mean like a pillow or a
Yeah,
teddy?
just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Something that
And
made me feel like I was safe.
yeah, I get that, sweetie. And why did you feel that you had to hide? I mean, I have to say, Monty was much the same. He kept his emotions quite hidden.
It just didn't feel right crying in front of someone because, like, it just, I don't know, just didn't feel right.
Yeah. You sort of, and you're maybe trying to protect everybody else a little bit as well, which can
Yeah.
can happen. Okay. And at the time, I mean, so you were taken out of class and told at school. Were the rest of your class told or your school told? So how did people react to you when you went back to school? Do you remember?
I'm pretty sure I can't remember, but they were told like a week after.
Okay. But did you have, I mean, what do you do now? Because you're at secondary school now. Do you ever talk about your dad? Does it ever become a subject of conversation between yourself and your peers?
Very rarely, but it does happen.
So it's not something that you would particularly hide.
No, it happened and I'm not scared of it.
Okay, that's a really powerful statement. Actually, it happened and you're not scared of it. And also, I think you don't want to deny your dad's existence. He's your dad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Otis, if I could ask you at 14, if you could go back to 7-year-old Otis,
Yeah.
is there anything that you know now that you wish that you could perhaps go back and say to him?
To my dad?
No,
Or
to
to me?
yourself, to you, to little Otis.
Little.
I don't mean that.
Honestly, I'm not really sure.
No.
Ah,
Do you feel like your world has calmed down and that things have sort of stabilised now a little?
yeah, mostly.
Yeah. I imagine that it's times like birthdays and Christmases and sort of big events for you guys. Your brother had a big birthday recently, didn't he? And
Yeah, yeah.
I know that as parents, we're often most affected by the dates that affect the children. We're pretty tough. We can take a lot of it on our chins, but we worry mostly about you. And I suppose the purpose of me recording this or talking to you is just to really try and get a younger person's perspective while it's so sort of while it's fresh in your mind, and because it is going to be a bit of a blur because it was half your lifetime ago, and I don't know about you, but do you feel that the more time that passes, the sort of less you remember, like the grains of sand slipping through the egg timer kind of thing?
Yeah, a bit. But I do remember things that, I just can't forget.
And what sort of things are they? Are they happy memories as well as sad?
I remember the funeral service,
Okay.
and I
So you
remember,
attended?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the party after,
The party, yes, the wake.
yeah, and the thing I mentioned before.
Yeah. And what was your dad like before he got sick?
Bold.
Bald, yes. Well, as a result of the cancer or prematurely balding?
Already a baldy.
Oh, you were keeping an eye on your hairline then?
Yep.
You've got a fine head of hair. And I suppose what do you feel that you miss the most by not having him around?
Someone that I can look up to
Yeah.
and base my personality off of.
Yeah, I give the concept of that father figure, and yeah, and I think also as you get older, you wish that you had known them as people rather than just as that sort of father role. Because when you're 7, like most of the parenting is just damage control, right? But
Yeah.
then you get to 14, and you guys become semi-formed humans, and you get to know us a bit better. And I know I personally feel that it's particularly with Monty because he's my eldest. I feel he was really cheated by not getting to know his dad, and it can be massively out of the blue. And I'm sure you find this with Mum. We'll just suddenly burst into tears, and you'll be like, "What's wrong, Mum?" And you'll be like, "Oh, they're never going to be a granddad to your children," and that sort of thing. Do you find that difficult to talk about, or are you quite open in your house?
We're quite open with our feelings, but it might be different for other households.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I'm really wanting to do with this kind of series of episodes is to push the importance of talking about the dead person and not hiding from the fact that somebody has died, and particularly with children, because not that many years ago, the way you dealt with it was you just never spoke of them again. And you took down the pictures and you almost pretended that they didn't exist. Dare you risk upsetting somebody? But what we know now is the pain is there anyway, so you might as well talk about them and have pictures up, as I know that you do at your house. I've seen pictures of your dad up.
I have a picture of my dad in my room. I have 2 pictures in my room.
Do you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Both my boys do, actually. And I have a handprint thing that I did years ago. So Tabby's handprint wasn't on it, but it's got Ben's, mine, and the other 2. and then I added hers. Just because you try and hold on to as many little bits of them as possible, don't you? Do
You
you
don't
have
want
any?
to... Sorry, no, you go on, go on.
I was going to ask if you had any of his clothes.
Oh yeah, I moved my room recently, so I got a bunch of his old clothes in my wardrobe.
I've just given Monty some because you guys suddenly shoot up and we realise that you're like the size of your father.
My
Uh,
brother started wearing my dad's clothes.
oh, has he? He got there first. Yes, that's the
Yeah.
downside of being the younger brother, I imagine. And do you and your brother ever talk about your dad? Do you and your brother ever
Not
talk?
not much.
No, I don't think my boys do. Well, did you have counselling when you were little, or as you got older?
Counseling. I did get taken out of lessons and
But play
have
therapy, probably.
it was like I'd draw something for an
Yeah,
hour.
it got you
I
out of
think that
class,
was,
didn't it?
yeah, I enjoyed it.
I mean, yeah, anything that gets you out of class, right? I did violin for years for just that reason. Don't ask me to play it. Now, the big question, I think, when your partner or somebody that you love dies and there is children involved, is the question, what about the children? Are they going to be completely defined by this? Are they going to live their lives as the kid whose dad died or mum died? And what can I possibly do to protect them? Have you got any sort of view on that? I mean, do you feel defined by the fact that your dad died, or do you feel that it is something terrible that happened to you, but that your life is going to be all right? I know what I'm hoping you say.
Yeah, so I feel I've changed as a person after my father's death,
Of
but
course.
it hasn't defined me.
Yeah. And do you think that it's sort of forced you to grow up a little bit? Because I know that my eldest feels sometimes that he sort of doesn't sit with his peers that well, the sort of age group, because of, the magnitude of what happened when he was 7.
Yeah, that's sometimes what I feel.
Yeah, and you're quite a sort of mature young man, aren't you? And as you, I mean, I'm just going off my question list here, really. But as boys, just because there's just you and your brother and your mum, did you feel this kind of need to protect your mum and kind of look after her, or did leave that to George?
I leave that to George.
I don't blame you. And I suppose, is there anything that you think would have been really beneficial, or is there anything that anybody said to you that you think back and think, oh my God, that was awful. Why did they say that to me?
Well, I think something that would be beneficial is getting them to talk with you, because that can
Yeah.
help them de-stress, actually let their emotions out, and
Yeah.
help with how they're dealing with it.
And do you find that it's easier to talk if you're doing something else, like if you're in the car or if you're playing a game or out for a walk or something like that?
Well, I don't really do that since I like to focus on conversations when I'm having a
Oh, do you?
conversation.
You like a full sit-down conversation? That's quite
Yeah,
unusual, actually, because I find my kids will talk to me more, basically, if I've got them held, kidnapped in the car, doors locked, driving on the motorway, can't get away from me now, kids. But I have a sort of similar policy, and I think sometimes Monty probably gets sick of me because I'm like, oh, look, I've just found this, it was your dad's. And I know that one thing that a previous guest, who was a little older than you, said was around the time of anniversaries and things, they felt under a certain amount of pressure to grieve. And actually, grief kind of comes along when it wants to. And before you've kind of got the autonomy or the voice to say so, children can feel a little bit like, oh, it's the anniversary, I have to feel sad today. Whereas you might actually just feel sad randomly 3 weeks later. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, the advice that you would give somebody caring for or supporting a child who's lost a parent would be that, to talk about them, don't silence it, don't forget they existed. And we talk a lot about being the custodian of the memories. So your mum is now the custodian of the memories that you can't remember, memories of your dad. And that's quite a responsibility. And I mentioned previously, about this kind of the feeling of them slipping through your fingers. And when, 7 to 14 is quite a long time. So a lot of your memories will be sort of things that you've been told and pictures. And it really is important to keep those bits of the person alive. So I think that's something that I would really recommend or suggest, or to anybody that is supporting a grieving child, is just please don't, pretend that they didn't exist. I'm not going to keep you much longer, Otis, because I know that teenage boys have got very important things to be doing. I just wanted to briefly touch upon the fact that you said that you feel like you have changed as a person. And again, that's something that we talk about quite a lot when I'm talking to people who've been widowed, is that you feel like you've been sort of landed into a foreign country without a guidebook, or and you don't know the language, and you have to sort of learn to navigate it and figure out who you are. Now you're living a life that you didn't expect to be living, because nobody expects for their dad to die when they're a child. It's not something, well, for most of us, it is nothing but a nightmare. But for you guys, you actually lived it. And I'm really, really sorry that happened to you, Otis. I really am. I wish that your dad was still here for you, for your mum, for your brother. But I think that the fact that you are here and you are able to talk to me, and you go to school, don't you? You're doing fine. You football?
No.
It's brother's football.
No, my brother's left football.
Oh, has he? Discovered girls and no longer wants to play football, I imagine.
Yeah, he's got a girlfriend.
Yeah, that happens. How many have you got?
17.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right. So do you anticipate, going on into the future and sort of, having relationships? Do you think that this will leave a sort of fear around you? Do you have, the fear of falling in love and that you might lose somebody because you've witnessed it happen?
Honestly, no, because it's a very rare case for a person to die, especially if it was your father.
Yeah.
Millions of people's die, and it's a very low chance for someone that's related to you to die.
And what about you? Do you have health anxiety at all?
Anxiety?
Or health?
I'm not sure. I haven't had a test, but I do feel quite anxious sometimes.
I wondered about health and things, because I know for the widows, often you get this kind of health anxiety where you're terrified that you're going to get sick. And I used to have this kind of massive drawer of vitamins that your mum and friends used to tease me about, especially as I usually swigged them down with a nice glass of wine, but thankfully no longer. I think that talking to you and hearing the perspective of, and you probably don't like being called a child, but I'm afraid legally you still are.
Yeah.
And I hope that it helps people, because you have got a life, and would you describe yourself as happy now?
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah, mostly. Just the odd little grief attack strikes, hey?
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask, you don't have to answer, whether you feel it has negatively impacted your mental health. Do you find that you struggle a little bit more to manage than other people, or who knows, I guess it could have...
I'm not sure, but I was quite a lot happier before my dad died.
Yeah. But then I think also you're now a teenager, and that's a tougher time in your life too. Well, listen, darling, I will stop there, because I don't want to keep you too much longer. But thank you ever so much for coming on and talking today. And I will let you and Mum have a listen back and check that you're happy with it, okay?
Okay, bye.
All right, darling. Take care of yourself, and hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode helpful, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you think someone else may benefit from this, please do share. We'd also really appreciate a quick review. It helps more people find the show. Thank you again, and see you next time on Widowed AF.